I'm Taylor.
I'm Kat.
And welcome to this week's episode of Square Mile of Murder. And we've got a very special case for you today in honor of our podcast title and our 10th episode. We made it to 10. How the fuck?
I know! And people are still listening and nobody's sent us hate mail yet.
I know.
think we're doing quite well.
Yeah, I know. I'm like really impressed with us. I mean, not to, toot our own horns or anything, but like, and during
pretty well.
During a pandemic, no less.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we're doing quite well. I'm really excited about this one, partly because I didn't write it.
Yes.
So what normally happens is I write the scripts and Taylor does the editing. So it's kind of, I cover pre-production, she covers post-production.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it works quite well. We play to our strengths.
We do. Yeah, my strength is not timeliness of writing, and this script was finished about 23 minutes ago. So
So I haven't read it yet.
No. So it could be interesting. I could have just made up a bunch of bullshit, but I didn't, but I could have. I don't know. I just really wanted to write this one because I really like this case, and I like all the like Square Mile murders a lot. And yeah, so I figured I'd try it. If it's a horrible disaster, we'll never do it again, but worth a shot, right?
So today we're going to look at the first of Glasgow's Square Mile murders, and we'll cover the next 3 every 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Today's case is the Today's case is the 1857 death of Pierre Emile L'Angelier. L'Angelier?
I don't know how to say it. So we're just gonna make it up as we go.
The 1857 death of Pierre Emile L'Angelier and Scotland's trial of the century. But first, maybe we should talk a little about the famous, or infamous, depending upon your viewpoint, Square Mile of Murder that we chose to name our podcast after.
I think that's probably a good idea. So in Glasgow, there is an area of the city called the Square Mile of Murder. And this nickname was first used by writer Jack House in his 1961 book called, Square Mile of Murder, fittingly.
How original.
Right? He coined the term because 4 of Scotland's most infamous murders were committed within 1 square mile area of the city. And that's what his book was about.
So this area is sort of west of the heart of the city centre, but still kind of part of the city centre. And we'll include a map of the area on social media and the website so you can see where we're talking about.
Yeah.
But basically, the area starts at Blytheswood Square, which is just east of Charing Cross, and it's where all the Instagram wannabes go to the spa.
I didn't know that.
That is... Oh, yeah, the Blytheswood is a spa that everyone's obsessed with on Instagram, and it's a spa.
Oh.
This is it's a spa.
Who knew?
That's all it is. So we go from Blytheswood. We then go west across the M8 motorway, which obviously wasn't there in the 19th century. So yeah, we go west towards Finnieston, up the Woodlands area of the city, and Great Western Road, which is a sort of major road that goes from the city centre out to the West End.
Yeah.
I don't think we described that very well, but...
No. Basically, it's like a little chunk of the city that's slightly west and a little bit more west of the city center.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these murders took place sort of in the heart of what we would consider the city today. But at the time they occurred, which was between the years 1857 and 1908, some of these areas were more residential than they are now. Especially some of the areas that were further west. Now those areas are sort of more cityfied than they were then.
You're just making up words now, aren't you?
Yeah. It's gonna be that kind of day.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's dig into the first of these cases. At 2:30 a.m. on March 23rd, 1857, Pierre Emile L'Angelier stumbled back to his lodging house on 11 Franklin Place in Glasgow. He pounded on the door until his landlady, Mrs. Anne Jenkins, opened up. She found him doubled over in pain on the doorstep and quickly helped him to his room. On the way there, L'Angelier, I can't say it right, he...
I am still going with L'Angelier.
L'Angelier.
I think it sounds better.
Okay, I'll try that. On the way there, L'Angelier said he was going to vomit, quote, more of that bile. Ew.
Nice.
And this wasn't the first time he'd been ill. This was the fourth time he'd felt this way in the past few weeks. Mrs. Jenkins put him to bed and covered him up with some blankets.
Oh, that was nice of her.
Very sweet.
By 7 a.m., his condition was much worse, and Mrs. Jenkins went to find a doctor. She returned with Dr. James Stephen, and he applied a mustard poultice. Wow. Yum. And told Emile to rest and promised to return between 10 and 11 a.m. Out in the hallway, the doctor asked Mrs. Jenkins if Emile was a drinker because his symptoms seemed similar to someone who was very drunk. Mrs. Jenkins assured the doctor that Emile didn't drink. After the doctor left, Emile's condition only worsened.
I just love that. It's like, this guy seems drunk. Are you sure he's not drunk? So at 9 a.m., Mrs. Jenkins asked if there was anyone she could get for Emile, and he responded that he wanted to see Miss Mary Perry of Renfrew Street. There's a lot of good names in this story.
Miss Mary Perry.
Miss Mary Perry. I think it was Miss Mary Arthur Perry, but you know, I don't know if she knows Mary Berry, but they could be a cool duo. Yeah, so Mrs. Jenkins sent someone to get Miss Perry, and around this time, Emile said, if I could get 5 minutes sleep, I think I would get better. So she let him rest, and when she next checked, he seemed to be sleeping. The doctor then returned, and she told the man that Emile had just fallen asleep, and it would be a shame to wake him. But the doctor went in anyway, and had to tell Mrs. Jenkins that Pierre Emile L'Angelier was dead.
Oh.
Shit.
Plot twist.
Yeah.
Yep. All he wanted was 5 minutes kip and never woke up again.
Right? That's a total bummer.
Miss Mary Perry arrived soon after, but was told she was too late. Mrs. Jenkins asked Miss Perry if she was Emile's fiancée, but she replied that she was only a friend. Mrs. Jenkins noted that the poor girl Emile intended to marry would be very distraught to hear the news. Soon after, L'Angelier's regular doctor, a friend and fellow lodger, and his supervisor at Huggins Seed Warehouse, William Stevenson, all arrived.
Yeah. I also love Huggins Seed Warehouse. Like, it's great.
It doesn't sound particularly Glaswegian, though, does it?
No, it doesn't. That's true. I hadn't thought of that. So
it's interesting.
Yeah. So they all show up, and Mrs. Jenkins told them that Emile had been out of town for the past several days, but had returned suddenly during the night. Mr. Stevenson took charge of Emile's belongings and found a letter in the pocket of the dead man's coat. The letter read, Why, my dear beloved, did you not come to me? Oh, beloved, are you ill? Come to me, sweet one. I waited and waited for you, but you came not. I shall wait again tomorrow night. Same hour and arrangement. Do come, sweet love, my own dear love of a sweetheart. Come, beloved, and clasp me to your heart. Come, and we shall be happy. A kiss, fond love, adieu, with tender embraces. Ever believe me to be your own dear, fond Mimi. Whew.
Beautiful. Why doesn't anyone write love letters like that anymore?
Right? I mean, just so many details, so many words to say so little things.
Where are you? Are you ill? Come and meet me where you're supposed to.
Yeah.
Upon reading the letter, Mr. Stevenson said, "This explains all." It's very intriguing. The next day, a postmortem exam was performed on L'Angelier's body, and the doctors came to the conclusion that he had died of poisoning. Medical experts found 85 grains of arsenic in his stomach. This was enough to kill 40 men.
That's a lot of arsenic.
That's a lot of arsenic.
Yeah. So let's go back a bit. The poor man has just died, but let's learn a little bit about him. Pierre Emile L'Angelier. Oh, fuck me. I can't say this. Good old Emile was born in 1822 on the Isle of Jersey. He was the eldest of 5 children born to a French couple, Pierre L'Angelier, and his wife, Victoire. Growing up, he was fluent in both French and English, and at age 14, he began an apprenticeship in his family's nursery business. When his father died in 1840, Emile, with the help of his mother and siblings, ran the family business as best they could.
Yeah, and just in case anyone doesn't know, a nursery in this context is plants, not children.
they weren't apprenticing, baby farming or anything. It's trees.
That's a completely different crime. That
totally different.
In 1842, Emile took the opportunity to continue his apprenticeship in Scotland and left home for the first time at the age of 19. He settled in Edinburgh and worked at the Dixons and Co. nursery. While living in the city, he entered his first serious relationship with a woman who has no name. Interesting.
Yeah.
Or at least her name hasn't made it into any of the records. Instead, she's known as the Lady of Fife.
Which is like quite a name.
I mean, it's a long time since I've been to Fife. I can't really remember what it's like.
The gremlin informed me that Fife is often not looked upon very fondly, and
it's kind of the hillbilly redneck area of Scotland.
Yeah, she works with some people from Fife, and apparently their position on it is, we're from Fife, and thank God we made it out.
Yeah.
So, if that tells you anything.
History is very fuzzy on the details, but the two may have been engaged and then over time grew apart. And this may have been one of the main reasons he left Edinburgh in 1846.
So after that, he ended up in Paris, where he lived for 5 years. While in Paris, Emile worked as a clerk at a mercantile exchange and enjoyed the city's famous nightlife while pursuing several romances.
What is a mercantile exchange?
A mercantile exchange? I think it's just like it's like a stock exchange.
Oh.
It's like trading commodities, metals, farm products, etc. He also, for a period of time, but we don't quite know how long, served in the army. So I guess he just left the army. Unclear about the circumstances there, but in 1851 he left Paris and returned to Edinburgh, where he learned his ex, the Lady of Fife, was engaged to someone else, which is so sad.
I mean, he did piss off for a few years,
right? So okay,
Lady of Fife ain't gonna wait forever, mate.
No. So this led him to pursue many relationships, but each one seemed to end in disappointment and rejection, which led him to bouts of depression, and at one point had Emile contemplating suicide.
Along with being unlucky for love, Edinburgh was no good for work. He left and spent some time working as a nursery labourer in Dundee, before he eventually settled in Glasgow in the summer of 1852. He lived at Kingston Place on the south side and worked at the Huggins & Co. Seed Warehouse at 10 Bothwell Street, that's in the city centre, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that off Sauchiehall Street?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. Glasgow city centre is kind of built on a grid.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar to an American city, which is why it quite often stands in for American cities in big film productions, because it's cheaper.
Yes, much cheaper.
All roads lead to either Argyle Street, Sauchiehall Street, or Buchanan Street.
Yeah.
That's pretty much just the way it goes.
Yeah, and most of the locations in this story center around Sauchiehall Street. It's a good way to sort of ground yourself when thinking about this if you're looking at a map.
He attended church at St. Jude's Episcopal, which I can never say.
Episcopal.
Episcopal at St. Jude's Church on Jane Street.
There you go.
Eventually he became friends with Mary Perry,
our dear
and would
friend.
often spend time with her at her home on Renfrew Street. She convinced him to move to a more socially acceptable area, so he moved to new lodgings in 1854, and he lived on Great Western Road near the Botanic Gardens. That is a nice area.
It's a very nice area. Well, I just love that she was like, listen, you can't live on the south side. You gotta be more fancy than that, bro.
Yeah, but like the south side is having a revival now. Everyone wants to live there. I want to live there.
I know. So if only he had waited, hundreds of years. Would have been fine.
Yeah, it would have been acceptable.
Yeah. So Emile often walked up and down Sauchiehall Street, which was one of the most desirable areas of town at the time, with the wealthy and the up and coming. Now it's still a major thoroughfare for city life, and it has a lot of clubs and restaurants and entertainment venues. Entertainment venues. But it's a little more grimy, I think, than it probably was during Emile's day.
I'm still upset that our favourite chicken wing place got shut down.
I know. I was thinking about that as I was writing this. It's like, man, that was
it
on
was so
Sauchiehall
worth
Street.
walking to the other end of Sauchiehall Street for.
It was.
Very disappointing.
Yeah. But back in 1854, there were less chicken wing places and more like fancy houses and shops.
Yeah.
Go figure. So Emile would dress in the latest fashions on these walks. He also sported a twirled mustache, as all fancy men should. And he would walk up and down Sauchiehall Street, hoping to catch the eye of a beautiful young woman. And on one of these strolls in 1855, he happened to do just that. He saw a, quote, gravely beautiful young woman. Bit of foreshadowing there.
Damn.
And
gravely beautiful. I want to be described as gravely beautiful.
so he sees this gravely beautiful young woman, And during later outings, they exchanged glances in the crowd and even began to unconsciously seek each other out. But it's 1855, and a fellow can't just go right up to a lady and say, "Hey, how are you? My name's Pierre, but my friends call me Emile. What's your name?"
Of course not. That would be so rude.
Yeah, seriously.
Instead, Emile had to concoct a scheme to properly meet this mystery woman. He managed to befriend some of her family's friends, Charles and Robert Bird, and had Robert introduce him when the two saw this woman on Sauchiehall Street in late February of 1855. Bird did just that, and Emile met his mystery lady. Her name was Madeleine Smith.
Aha. The gravely beautiful Madeleine Smith.
Oh, yeah. She was the gravely beautiful Madeleine Smith.
So Madeleine Hamilton Smith was born in Glasgow in 1836, which would make her just 19 at the time of her meeting with Emile. She was the oldest of 5 children born to architect James Smith and his wife Elizabeth. The Smith family lived in a big fancy house on India Street, which was near James's office on St. Vincent Street, and all sort of in and around the city center. Because Madeleine's mother Elizabeth was described as being, quote, of delicate health, Madeleine often took over caring for the house and raising her younger siblings.
Delicate health.
Yeah, I couldn't...
How ill do you have to be of delicate health?
I don't know. It's such an interesting turn of phrase that, I also couldn't quite figure out what ailments she had. I think the stuff I found was basically she often took to her bed and spent the day there. So, yeah, it kind of seems like there was probably some mental health issues, but we wouldn't want to refer to those outright because it's the Victorian era and we don't refer to anything outright. So at the age of 14, Madeleine was sent from Glasgow to London to attend finishing school at Gorton's Academy for Young Ladies. And at Gorton's Academy...
I already hate it.
But just wait. At Gorton's Academy, the curriculum included lots of prayer, music lessons, needlework, and of course, lessons in good manners.
I like the needlework part of that because I do like crafts.
Yeah.
That's it.
There's none of the prayer?
No.
Same.
Mrs. Alice Gorton, who ran the school, kept close watch on her pupils and didn't allow them much privacy, which of course meant that they all got very good at keeping secrets, passing notes, and the like. And Madeleine was no exception to this. On the outside, she impressed her teachers, who described her as diligent, attentive, and bright, though they did note that she could be prone to stubborn sulks. I mean, that's literally every person in the entire world.
Well, I know, I was going to say same. I stubbornly sulk all the time.
Yeah, if you don't stubbornly sulk, you're a liar.
You're not doing teenager right.
In 1853, Madeleine graduated from Gorton's and went home to Glasgow, where she was supposed to wait, like all finished ladies did, for someone suitable to ask her to marry him.
Now, this is the point in the story where I mentioned that one of my major sources for writing this was Rick Geary's graphic novel about the case. And in this part, when he mentions that she's supposed to just wait to be proposed to, he literally drew Madeleine sitting in a window just waiting to be proposed to. And I just thought that that is so perfect. But if you'll remember those stubborn sulks described by the teachers, Madeleine was kind of just stubborn in general and didn't like the idea of just waiting around for some dude to propose. She wanted romance and intrigue and drama, just like she often read about in popular fiction magazines of the time. But
I don't blame him.
I mean, no.
Who doesn't want some intrigue and some drama?
Exactly. Like, it's fair. It's just sitting, staring out a window, waiting for men can get pretty boring. So, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, or so I've heard. Maybe not the right person to ask, but whatever.
Oh no, it gets boring. You got to have Netflix on in the background or something.
That's fair enough. She probably had her 4 siblings just reenacting plays in the parlor while she waited. You know, but these desires for drama and intrigue were her secret desires, and she still had to appease her parents.
How scandalous.
I know. And so, to get them off her back, she attended all the necessary balls and parties that one needed to attend to find a husband. And she was known around town to be a bit of a flirt, but not fast like some other young ladies in those social circles.
Oh, get over it, you prudes. By age 18, she was permitted to go on unchaperoned daytime outings.
Sounds fun, doesn't it?
Wow. Often with her younger sister, Bessie. They often walked along Sauchiehall Street and perused the shops for the latest fashions. It was during one of these outings with Bessie that Madeleine and Emile finally met after sharing so many glances. Once they met, they spent as much time together as possible, and as much time as was proper, by meeting at prearranged times in shops or along Sauchiehall Street.
But these meetings were stopped when the Smith family left Glasgow in April to spend time at their country house about 20 miles up the River Clyde in a town called Roe, which is near Helensburgh.
I know it's the Victorian times and 20 miles is quite a distance.
Yeah.
But if I had a country home, I wouldn't want it to be 20 miles outside the city near Helensburgh.
No, not really.
You'd want it to be like up in the Highlands or something.
Yeah, right. Like, I'd want to be a little further flung. But they got to take the ferry there, which is pretty cool. So it's a trade-off. Their large home was called Roellen, I think is how you pronounce it. So we're going to...
Yeah, I think so.
So we're going to go with that. And of course, it was named because fancy people in the UK name their houses, and it's fascinating. And yeah, it's a thing.
At one time, all houses had names.
Oh, well.
My parents' house has a name. All the houses on our streets do, and they're like 2 up, 2 down, semi-detached houses.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to name this house. Let's see. It will be Roadside Manor, Crow Road edition. And yeah, to give you an idea of the size of this country home, it's now called Invergare Castle. So, not a small little country cottage. Castleworthy now.
Nice.
So while at Roellen, Madeleine wrote the first of many letters to Emile. 198 in total were found among his possessions after his death. So
she was quite the wordsmith.
She was very productive in the letter writing department. And in this first letter, she wrote about how much she enjoyed his company and their walks together.
I have actually just Googled Invergare Castle. Damn!
It's fucking gorgeous.
Unfortunately, it seems that Madeleine didn't keep any of Emile's letters to her. So what we know about their correspondence is very one-sided.
Yeah.
But her next letter made one thing very clear. Her father was not happy about their budding friendship. Mr. Smith learned from, quote-unquote, some friend, who many believe could have actually been Madeleine's sister Bessie, that Madeleine had been meeting with Emile, and he was outraged that his daughter was walking around town with a gentleman unknown to him, who was also a foreigner and a mere clerk.
I mean, that is pretty damn outrageous.
Is he really a foreigner, though? Because the Channel Islands are technically part of the British Isles.
I think technically he's not a foreigner, but I also think Mr. Smith didn't really care. Now, because of this snag, Madeleine wrote that they must stop their correspondence. But they were super hot for each other, and that only lasted a couple days before they were writing letters again.
It's such self-restraint.
Right? It's like literally like a week goes by and then the letters start up again. And here's where things started getting hot and heavy. Madeleine used all the secrecy skills she learned at finishing school and receives Emile's letters under the name Miss Richard or possibly Miss Bruce. Accounts differ, at the post office. And she even taught Emile some of the sneaky tricks she knew, including telling him to come to Rowan to meet her, but to get off the ferry at Helensburgh, which is the stop before. And once he walked the rest of the way to the house, they would meet in secret in the property's walled gardens.
So when the Smiths were in Glasgow and her parents were out, Madeleine snuck Emile into the laundry room with the help of sympathetic housemaid Christina Haggart. Christina often shuttled letters back and forth between the two, while Emile's friend Miss Perry let him meet in her parlour. Oh, scandalous.
Yeah.
Emile told Miss Perry that he was determined to win over Mr. Smith and to marry Madeleine.
But in July of 1855, one of Madeleine's letters put poor odds on that ever happening. She said that her father had told her once again to stop speaking to Emile, and she wrote, "Father hates you with all his heart. He despises you." Which, harsh.
That is just... I mean, let the guy down gently.
Right? She wasn't great at that.
If they were younger, it would be very much like teenage angst, but they're a bit too old for that excuse to fly.
When they met, she was 19. He's 10 years older. So, like...
Yeah, grow up a bit.
Yeah, she is sort of still teen-ish, and he's not. Yes, so learning that Mr. Smith despised him, you know, as will happen, it broke poor Emile's little heart. And he considered shipping out to work in Peru, but he didn't need to worry because Madeleine quickly started writing to him again, though this time she signed all her letters as Mimi.
Why Peru?
Apparently...
It's very extreme.
It's a weird choice. Apparently, he thought he could earn a lot more money and gain cultural status by going to Peru. Then he just decided, nah, never mind, I'm good.
By the end of 1855, Emile wanted to go public with their relationship, while Madeleine was desperate to keep it all a secret. They had different objectives, but still the romance continued, and the letters indicate that by this point they considered themselves engaged and had set a wedding date in September of the following year. Though in 1856 their romance continued until one summer evening in the gardens of Rouen, when they finally consummated their relationship.
So after they took it on down to Pound Town, Madeleine... You're like,
seriously?
Yeah. Hey, you let me write it. This is what was going to happen.
Yeah, and your punishment is you're not allowed to write anything for 10 more episodes.
I think our listeners will find this delightful.
Okay.
We'll see. Tell us on social media. Right, so Pound Town. Madeleine wrote to Emile saying she didn't have any regrets about having sex out of wedlock. She wrote, quote, "If we did wrong last night, it was in the excitement of our love. Yes, beloved, I did truly love you with my soul. Tell me, pet, were you angry at me for allowing you to do what you did? Was it very bad of me?" And like, yeah, what an over-the-top letter writing style.
she appears to have become a Geordie very briefly. So pet is like, you know, like how here in like Glasgow they say hen.
Yeah.
In Newcastle, sometimes in Sunderland, not so much, but definitely in Newcastle they say pet.
Well, she calls him my pet a lot. So, but yeah, her letters are something else, and we've really only included here like little bits and pieces, but they go on and on and on, and like every sentence ends with a "my beloved" or, you know, "yours truly, my love, my sweet love, love me forever, yours, Madeleine," or Mimi, or whatever. So it's a lot.
Yeah. So there was that program, I think it was Crime Files. It was on BBC Scotland a while ago.
Yeah.
And they actually covered this case. And so along with this, in one of the other letters, she describes giving him a blowjob, which obviously was like the most scandalous, salacious thing ever, because that was something only prostitutes did.
Yeah.
And obviously she was not a sex worker, she was a socialite from the upper classes, so it was absolutely horrific that she would not only do these things but describe them in letters as well.
Yeah, write them all down. Yeah, there's one where she's like, "How nice it was to see you last night and to be fondled by you." It's like, oh.
Emile, it turned out, was angry with Madeleine. In a surviving draft of his reply, he wrote, "Since I saw you, I have been wretchedly sad. Would to God we had not met that night. I am sad at what we did. I regret it very much." Oh.
Yeah.
That's
ouch.
I mean, it's usually the other way around. It's usually the woman regretting it.
Yeah,
but, you know.
no, she was totally fine with it all.
He goes on, "My conscience reproached me of a sin that marriage can only efface." So now that they've sinned, super hard, Emile was desperate to actually get hitched. And he implored Madeleine to stop going all around town being the belle of the balls that her parents insisted she would attend.
And it seems like she did try, at least a little bit, to limit her socializing. But this all hit a snag when she met one William Billy Minnick. He was a very well-off and socially connected merchant in his 30s, and he was really into Madeleine. And Mr. Smith approved of Minnick and pushed the pairing. Now, to put into perspective the sort of different economic circles that Minnick and Emile belonged to, Emile earned 10 shillings a week at his nursery clerk job, which would net him about £24 per year. Minnick, on the other hand, earned £3,000 per year. And to put that into even more perspective, in today's money, Emile was earning about £2,604 per year, and old Billy Boy was earning the equivalent of £325,514 per year. So,
I mean, as I see it, there's a very simple solution. You marry the rich bloke and you have an affair with the poor bloke.
I mean, that would be a very good way to go about this. Unfortunately, not the route she took.
Madeleine started seeing Minnick a lot, and in her letters to Emile, she tried to address any fears he might have that she had eyes for someone else. She wrote, "Don't give an ear to any reports you may hear." Try saying that when you're drunk.
Yeah, really.
"There are several I hear going about that I'm to be married. Regard them not. True and constant I will prove. Don't fear me, I shall be thine." But their previously planned September wedding got postponed.
Yeah. So in the fall of 1856, Emile moved to Mrs. Jenkins' small rooming house at 11 Franklin Place, which was basically just around the corner from the Smiths' house on India Street. And also the Smiths then moved to the fashionable and fancy Blytheswood Square, apparently of spa fame.
Didn't have a spa at the time.
No, just lots of nice houses. They moved into a large house, and from the outside it looked like they owned the whole building. But in fact, the Smith family only lived in the ground floor and in the basement. And, who would have guessed it? But one Mr. Billy Minnick owned one of the upstairs flats. It's just a crazy coincidence. Who knew?
How did that happen, I wonder?
It's just wild, really. So Madeleine shared a basement bedroom with her younger sister, Janet. And their room had windows facing the street that were level with the sidewalk. And it was easy for Madeleine and Emile to pass letters back and forth between the bars on the windows.
Oh, how romantic.
Right? She even told him, listen, you should go buy brown envelopes so that they blend in with the ground better when you drop them into my window.
Oh my God.
This woman was something else.
Sometimes Emile would even wait in the cold until Janet fell asleep so he could talk to Madeleine through the window. He, probably quite smartly, bribed the local policeman on duty at Blytheswood Square with cigars, and the police turned a blind eye to his loitering. Sometimes, when it was very cold, Madeleine would pass Emile a cup of hot cocoa through the window, and it was easy for her to mix up hot drinks like cocoa because her bedroom was right next to the house's kitchen.
Oh,
so very convenient.
It is very convenient. But as the winter continued, she started to find it difficult to keep up her double life. Billy Minnick spent lots of time at the Smith house during the Christmas season, and Madeleine's parents assumed that he would propose, at any minute. And Madeleine continued to write Emile, and she kept signing her letters with things like, Adieu, my dear Emile, believe me, thine ever-true, devoted, affectionate wife, Mimi L'Angelier. On January 23rd of 1857, she wrote to Emile saying, If we could only get married, all would be well, but alas, alas, I see no chance of happiness for me.
5 days later, Minnick proposed and Madeleine accepted.
Womp womp.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's true. Women don't want boys. What is it? Girls don't want boys. Girls like cars and money.
Yes. The classic Victorian adage.
Madeleine's letters to Emile began to get colder and more distant. And when he returned one of her letters, she took the opportunity to try and break off their engagement.
Smart.
She's engaged to another man now, so...
Might be
she
time.
Should probably end it with one of them.
Yeah, right.
She wrote, I felt truly astonished to have my last letter returned to me, but it will be the last you shall have the opportunity of returning to me. When you are not pleased with the letters I send you, then our correspondence shall be at an end. And as there is coolness on both sides, our engagement had better be broken. You may be astonished at this sudden change, but for some time back you must have noticed a coolness in my notes. My love for you has ceased, and that is why I was cool. I did once love you truly, fondly, but for some time back I have lost much of that love.
It is really harsh.
There are kind of shorter, easier ways to say that.
Yeah, right?
None of them spring to mind, but there must be.
There has to be something better than, you gave me back one of my letters, so by the way, I haven't loved you for a really long time. I also love because there's coolness on both sides, our engagement had better be broken. You better. It's just balls up, lady, and just tell him to kick it to the curb. But even if she had ballsed up and done just that, Emile wasn't gonna hear it. He regarded her as his wife, and he told Madeleine that he would show her letters to her father to prove the criminal intimacy that had happened between them, which, of course, Madeleine wasn't super happy with. She begged him not to share the letters and to wait until they could speak in person. On February 11th, she wrote, "I put on paper what I should not. Do not make me a public shame." Meanwhile, around this time, she sent the Smith family page, William Murray, along to a chemist's shop to buy a vial of prussic acid, but the druggist refused to sell it to the young boy. And if you didn't know, like I didn't know and had to look it up, prussic acid? Yeah, that's cyanide.
Yeah, Prussic blue is actually the name of the type of cyanide they used in gas chambers in Nazi concentration camps and death camps.
So she was just casually trying to send the small child servant to go buy her some cyanide.
On that same day, Wednesday, February 11th, Emile started to keep a diary in a small pocket notebook. He wrote down what he did each day with little notes like, dined at Mr. J. Mitchell's and saw M at 12 p.m. in CH room. That would be Christina Haggart's room, the Smith family's sympathetic maid. Here, Emile and Madeleine reconciled. Again. Emile saw Madeleine again on February 13th, and on February 14th he received a letter from her. In this letter, she asked him to return her cool letters and she'd give him some nicer ones in exchange. They continued to meet, and on Thursday, February 19th, Emile wrote, saw Mimi a few moments, was very ill during the night.
Interesting. Now, on Saturday, February 21st, Madeleine went to the Murdoch Brothers Apothecary on Sauchiehall Hall Street and bought a 6 pence worth of arsenic. She told the clerk she was buying it to get rid of pests in the garden at Roellen, and she had to sign her name to the poison book, which was required by law for all sales of things like arsenic. And she left the shop with an ounce of arsenic.
And arsenic was required by law to be mixed with some sort of colouring agent like soot or indigo, so people wouldn't confuse the white powder with salt or sugar. But it would be easy to disguise the powder in something like, let's just say, hot chocolate.
Just as an example. Totally random.
Where did we get that from?
I don't know. Just off the top of my head.
Emile and Madeleine continued to meet, and Emile continued to get knocked down by this mysterious stomach illness. He regularly had chills, a fever, and vomiting, sometimes vomiting bile.
Gross. While spending time with his friend, Miss Mary Perry, the best named friend ever, Emile mentioned that he thought it may be the cups of hot chocolate from Madeleine that had been making him sick. And on March 9th, he even told Miss Perry, quote, I can't think why I was so unwell after getting that coffee and chocolate from her. It is a perfect fascination, my attraction to that girl. If she were to poison me, I would forgive her. Perhaps she might not be sorry to be rid of me.
Oh, get a life, man.
He's a bit of a sap.
You're going to forgive her if she poisons you to get you out of the way so she can marry the rich man and everyone's happy?
I know, and also, you can't forgive her if you're dead, so something to chew on.
On Friday, March 6th, Madeleine and her friend Jane Buchanan went to Curry's apothecary, where she bought another 6 pence of arsenic to help her get rid of rats at her house. Obviously. Definitely attracting those rats, this Madeleine.
Yeah.
The two friends even joke while Madeleine is signing the poison book about how funny it is for a respectable young lady to be buying such a deadly substance.
It's hilarious.
That afternoon, the Smith family leaves Glasgow for a holiday in the spa town of Bridge of Allen, which is just outside of Stirling.
So Madeleine told Emile not to follow her to Bridge of Allen because she wouldn't have time to see him. She wrote, quote, "I hope you won't go to B of Allen. It would make me feel very unhappy. Stirling you need not go to, as it is a nasty, dirty little town."
We interrupt our regularly scheduled programming for a podcast gremlin update about the town of Stirling.
Only in Stirling could you look out your window and see two bums fighting with crutches, medieval style.
Also, Madeleine didn't want Emile to show up because Billy Minnick would be there too. And in fact, on that trip to Bridge of Allen, they set a date for their wedding, June 18th.
While she's in Bridge of Allen, Emile went to Edinburgh for a week and stayed with some friends who noted he didn't look so hot. Was it those exact words?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the direct translation.
On March 18th, Madeleine returned to Glasgow and bought even more arsenic from Curry's apothecary.
It just
Them
can't
damn
get
rats.
enough. All right? Those rats, they speak French. They're about 6 feet tall. They got a mustache. They're everywhere.
That same day, she wrote to Emile and asked him to meet her the next night. But Emile had left to go to Bridge of Allen and had his mail forwarded to his hotel and received the letter too late to return to Glasgow.
So Madeleine wrote him another letter after he didn't show up, this time pleading to see him again. Now, this is the letter that's ultimately found in Emile's coat after his death. Once the letter reached him in Bridge of Allen on Sunday, March 22nd, Emile immediately returned to Glasgow. He returned to his rooming house and spoke to Mrs. Jenkins at 8 p.m. when he asked her to give him the house key because he thought he might be out late.
At around 9:30 p.m, Emile tried to visit the lodging house of St. Vincent Street. He was then seen walking along Sauchiehall Street towards Blythewood Square. Where he was or what he did for the next several hours are unknown, and he was next seen at 2:30 a.m. at his boarding house in extreme pain. Suspicious.
And we know what happened next. Emile died of arsenic poisoning on March 23rd, and on March 26th, he was buried in the Stevenson family vault, his boss's family vault, at the Ramshorn Churchyard on Ingram Street, where his remains remain to this day.
Actually, me and my dad were walking through the Merchant City a few months ago and actually found where that cemetery is because I'd read
Really?
about it and I was trying to figure out where it was and I was like, oh, it's here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've walked by it like several times, just accidentally.
But it's now owned by Strathclyde Uni and it was all locked, so we couldn't go in.
Oh, that's a bummer. On March 25th, the Procurator Fiscal, James Hart, read several of the letters between Madeleine and Emile and was shocked by their contents, as he should be. Madeleine was interviewed at her home and admitted that they had had a romantic relationship and correspondence, but that she hadn't seen Emile for several weeks. Plus, she was engaged to someone else, so, what did it really matter anyway? Obviously.
I mean, that's a great excuse, isn't it?
Right? It's like, I this other guy, I said I'd marry him, so what does it matter that I was talking to this French guy? But investigators learned that she had made 3 separate purchases of arsenic in prior weeks, and on March 31st, 1857, Madeleine was arrested and charged with 1 count of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder.
And now we get to Scotland's trial of the century. Madeleine only ever made one statement about this whole sordid affair, and that was to police on the day of her arrest. She told them that she had been romantically connected with Emile, but because of his poor health, she hadn't seen him for 3 weeks. Quite convenient.
Yeah.
She said that she had written asking desperately to meet with him so she could tell Emile of her engagement to William Minnick. But Emile didn't show up on Saturday, and she said she didn't see him on Sunday either. She admitted to buying arsenic, but told her interviewers that she used it as a cosmetic, diluted, of course, and put on her face, neck, and arms, a trick she learned while at school at Mrs. Gorton's academy. She also admitted to giving Emile cocoa from her basement window, but swore she never poisoned it. And regardless of whether you think she's innocent or guilty, it was actually a thing to put arsenic in your makeup.
Yeah. So, now, whether or not it was a thing to swear up and down that you didn't poison someone's drink, we'll leave that up to you to decide. From her arrest in March until her trial began on June 30th, 1857, Madeleine was held in Glasgow's North Prison. The local newspapers wrote often of the trial, and the case stirred the public into a frenzy. This led authorities to move the trial to Edinburgh's High Court, because people in Glasgow were already overly familiar with the case, and there was a general opinion among the upper class of society that Madeleine was innocent and that Emile had committed suicide. Now, members of the common classes, quote unquote, believed that a wealthy young lady like Madeleine wouldn't hesitate to get rid of Emile if he proved inconvenient.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
When the trial began, the streets were filled with curious citizens and members of the international press, and the courtroom was filled beyond capacity. Well, that sounds like a fire hazard.
Yeah, a little bit.
She was tried before a 3-judge panel and was represented by a defence team of 3, led by John Inglis, hired by her father. Her parents didn't attend the trial. They remained in Glasgow, but her younger brother Jack was in the crowd. Her jury consisted of 15 men, including 3 farmers, 1 merchant, 1 bootmaker, a courier, a teacher, a clerk, a cabinet maker, a cattle feeder, a shoemaker, and 4 gentlemen. Not forgetting the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker.
Candlestick maker. That's what I thought when I was reading through that. I was like, God, I also love that they clarify the difference between a bootmaker and a shoemaker. We mustn't mix the two.
No, of course not.
Yes. So during the Crown's case, a chemist testified saying that it would be nearly impossible to accidentally administer that much arsenic to someone. Christina Haggart, the maid, told the court about the secret meetings between Madeleine and Emile that she helped facilitate. Mrs. Jenkins testified about Emile's strange and violent illnesses, and Miss Mary Perry told the court about Emile's suspicion that Madeleine may have been trying to poison him. Now, the Crown also had Billy Minnick testify and say that he had never known Emile even existed and that Madeleine had kept it all a secret. Minnick left court that day and never spoke to or saw Madeleine again.
That's quite impressive considering they all lived in the same building.
I know, right? Yeah. It's just like, nope, I'll have none of it. And off he went.
So she got rid of the guy she actually liked, and now she's lost the rich guy because of it. So really, she's just not doing very well.
Exactly. Like, who really lost here? On the 5th day of the Crown's case, many of Madeleine's letters were read into the record, including the scandalous ones about, being fondled and, quote, loving each other in the gardens. And of course, all of the details of these letters were promptly printed by the press.
The defence had a built-in advantage when it came to presenting their case. Because Emile's letters and diary were not allowed to be read in court because their authenticity could not be proven, this left Madeleine with no direct evidence against her. She didn't testify, but instead the statement she'd given to police on March 31st was read aloud. Some of Emile's acquaintances testified that he was sensitive and fragile when it came to women, and told the court he had considered suicide before. One local shopkeeper testified that he kept his supply of arsenic unguarded during the day, and that Emile could have come in and stolen some at any time. Well, that's silly.
I just love that. It's like, oh, yes, I own a shop in this town where this happened, and I don't guard my arsenic, so obviously this guy came in and just stole some.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Totally plausible.
Madeleine's sister, Janet, testified that Madeleine fell asleep in their room on March 22nd and was still there on the morning of March 23rd. But did Janet sleep during that time? How does she know where her sister was if she was asleep?
Exactly. And legend has it that Janet was a very heavy sleeper. So even if Madeleine had skittered away to poison someone, she might not have noticed.
Exactly.
On July 7th, the Crown's closing arguments included a plea to the jury to focus on the purchases of arsenic, which clearly pointed to Madeleine's guilt. The next day, the defense's closing arguments insisted that Emile was unbalanced and had seduced Madeleine into their lurid affair. The defense also argued there was no evidence that the two had seen each other after any of Madeleine's arsenic purchases, and that surely if she didn't want people to find her letters, she never would have killed him, because that would obviously guarantee that the letters would be found. So, you know.
Yeah, that does make sense.
It does. It does. It's a good argument. And when the defense finished their closing arguments, the courtroom burst into applause. So
that kind of gives you a clear indication of where we're going.
A little bit.
On July 9th, the jury deliberated for just 22 minutes and returned. On the first count of attempted murder, they found Madeleine not guilty. On the second count of attempted murder and the charge of murder, they find her not proven. Or not proven.
Yes.
Is actually pronounced in Scottish.
Yes. And here we get to talk a little bit about the weird third verdict that exists in Scottish courts. Now, in other parts of the world, a not proven or proven verdict is sometimes called the Scottish verdict, and apparently in Scotland it's sometimes called the bastard verdict, a term coined by Sir Walter Scott himself.
Why not?
Yeah. So a verdict of not proven in Scots law basically sits somewhere in between guilty and not guilty. The idea is that if a jury returns a verdict of not proven, they believe that the defendant is guilty, but that the Crown didn't provide sufficient evidence to prove that the defendant is guilty.
I can't remember what it was. Some documentary I watched last year, I think. And it was a Scottish crime documentary, and they talk about the not proven verdict as actually it was originally guilty or not proven. Not guilty originally wasn't in. It wasn't a part of like the Scottish verdicts.
Yeah.
So originally not proven was actually the same as not guilty, and it's just stuck.
Yeah.
So make of that what you will. I think most people understand it as we think you're guilty, but it's not been proven.
Yeah, especially because in I think it was the early 1700s, they reformed the system and brought in not guilty in addition to guilty and not proven. And so because it was just kind of hanging out there as this extra thing, that like the definition of it kind of began to change.
Yeah.
So
after being found not proven, Madeleine was released and the courtroom and crowds outside erupted into cheers. She returned to Glasgow but had trouble escaping her newfound infamy. She ultimately moved to London with her brother Jack, and she took the name Lena and met George Waddell, whose watercolour class she was taking. Aww.
Such a meet cute.
Yeah. Waddell also worked as a draftsman and as the business manager for the designer William Morris. He proposed to her and didn't care about her notorious past, and they got married on July 4th, 1861. They had 2 children, Mary Kitten Waddell, weird, born in 1863, and Thomas Waddell, born in 1864.
Lena and George became part of London's cultural and political avant-garde scene and became friendly with many famous artists and politicians of the time, including writer George Bernard Shaw, who apparently liked to joke that he would gladly drink coffee served by her and wasn't afraid of the consequences.
I mean, that is when it's just that's your time that you actually poison someone.
Yeah,
Just
right.
To be like, ha ha, joke's on you.
When they're really not expecting it.
Then you've got to have a very, very fast escape plan, but you know.
Yeah. Their children grew up to be as free-spirited as their mother. Thomas became a well-known radical, and Kitten became an advocate for free love and shocked those around her by smoking in public. It's just terribly shocking.
It's interesting how things come around again, because now we get really pissed off at people smoking in public.
I know. How Victorian of us. Yeah, so Lena became known as one of the leading hostesses in London, and she's even credited with doing away with tablecloths in favor of placemats at dinners, which apparently was considered very scandalous because in Victorian times, all legs, including table legs, needed to be covered at all times.
What about chair legs?
I don't know. You know, that's a good loophole there. Could have very, scandalous naked chair legs.
I just find it amusing that men are that fucking backwards that they can't see a table leg.
A table
it has
leg
to be covered.
Yeah, I know.
Like how were people wired up back then? Because I have a lot of questions.
I know, seriously.
George left Lena in 1889, and she lived alone for many years in the town of Leek in Staffordshire. That is leek as in the vegetable leek, not a leak in the roof.
Yeah.
Unless that is where you keep your vegetables.
Onion Town.
Oh, there's some cracking place names in England.
Yeah.
And Scotland.
Just...
We'll have to compile a list.
Oh, for sure.
People came to know her as a bit of an eccentric recluse and often saw her walking around town in strange clothes and a shocking red wig.
I just, love that detail and also want to know where she got a fucking red wig.
I would like to come to be known as an eccentric recluse who walks around town in strange clothes.
Fair enough.
That's my goal in life.
I think we can make that happen for you.
By 1916, Lena moved to New York City, where she lived with her son, Tom. In New York, she met and married the second husband?
Second husband, fourth
fiancé.
Dude. Yeah.
That we know of.
Yeah, exactly.
William A. Sheehy.
Yes. And she was in her 80s by this point, but she looked much younger than she actually was apparently, and Sheehy was in his 60s when they got married, so she was robbing the cradle a little bit there.
Oh.
I know. In New York,
well, I mean, she's lived a whole life of infamy, so
I know, really.
Why stop in your 80s?
Just go for it, lady. In New York, she was approached by several different people wanting to sell the story of her notorious life in Glasgow, but she sent each one of them away. William Sheehy died in 1926, and Madeleine died on April 12th, 1928, of kidney failure at the age of 92. But for some reason, nobody seems quite clear on, her death certificate lists her as being 64 at the time of her death. So just another weird quirk in this woman's life.
Well, if she looked younger, maybe she was still passing herself off as being in her 60s.
Maybe. She was buried at Mount Hope Cemetery in Hastings-on-Hudson in New York. And that is the story of the death of Pierre Emile L'Angelier and the trial of Madeleine Smith. So, what do we think?
I think she was guilty.
Yeah, me too.
I think she is the kind of stereotypical rich person who got away with it.
Yeah.
He was of lower class. He was quote unquote foreign, depending how you look at it. Obviously French parents, but born in, was it Jersey or Guernsey? One of the Channel Islands.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think she was guilty. But also, she was a hell of a woman.
Yeah.
I'm not condoning the whole murdering people who get in her way. But, she did what she wanted and she didn't conform. And clearly passed that on to her daughter as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guilty.
Yeah. I agree.
But equally not proven, so
Yes. I think the whole trial bit of it is really interesting because it was such a sort of built up and fantastical thing in the press, and then, the jury came back in under a half an hour and they were like, we think she probably did it, but who's really to say? You guys didn't prove it, so go on with your life.
Yeah. 22 minutes isn't really enough time to deliberate a murder case.
No, I don't think so. But yeah, she's super guilty, and I think this is a really interesting case. And I love reading her crazy fucking letters. They are just bananas. And we'll link the Jack House's book, Square Mile of Murder, because he includes a ton of her letters in their pretty much entirety. And they're really, it's worth it to spend sort of an afternoon reading them and just bathing in their absurdity.
Yeah, I'm going to have to borrow the graphic novel from you when we get out of quarantine because
it's really good.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for listening, and stay tuned this week because we've got another square meter of murder minisode coming out for our $5 a month upwards patrons.
Yeah.
And if you haven't already signed up for our Patreon, you can do so at www.patreon.com/square mile of murder. Tiers start from just $1 a month, which I haven't checked the exchange rate for a few days, is about 80p.
Yeah,
it's less than a can of Iron Brew.
It's very affordable.
Yeah, all $1 and up patrons get episodes a day early, like fancy people, and $2 a month and up you get very special merch, which is finally being printed and we're very excited about.
Yes,
although half of it is still in transit somewhere between Germany and North Yorkshire.
Of course.
Yeah, I haven't got it yet.
It's coming though. It definitely exists.
On its way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very exciting. I think we're up to 4 patrons now. They may or may not all be related to me in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. But
I haven't got round to bullying my family into it yet.
You gotta get on that.
I know, I'm slowly breaking them down.
There you go. Bit by bit, right? Yeah, so come check out the Patreon. Come hang out with us on social media. Let us know what you think of this case. Do you think that we've chosen a good podcast name based on, this 1/4 of this infamous area of town? And you can find, as always, links to more information about the case, including some of our sources like Jack House's book or Rick Geary's graphic novel, The Case of Madeleine Smith. You can find those in our show notes or on our website. We have pages for each individual episode. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. And to our patrons, we will see you on Friday.
Yes.
With a case I'm very excited about and very angry that BuzzFeed Unsolved did it a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, they scooped
I'm not
us.
over it. Not over it.
But we'll do it better, right?
Obviously.
Duh. All right. We'll see you guys then.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.